What if one of the world's most efficient, modern cities was quietly losing its pulse? Singapore has long been seen as a symbol of growth, precision, and unstoppable momentum. Glass towers, packed malls, and one of the busiest airports on Earth. But recently, a different story has started to circulate. One that feels almost impossible at first glance. Some observers claim that parts of Singapore are emptying out. That famous buildings are seeing fewer people. That spaces once full of life now feel strangely quiet. And perhaps most surprising of all, that sections of its world-renowned airport are no longer as busy as they once were. Now, before jumping to conclusions, it's important to ask a simple question. Is Singapore really dying, or is something more complex happening beneath the surface? Because cities don't just collapse overnight. They shift. They evolve. And sometimes, what looks like decline is actually transformation. In this video, we're going to unpack what's really going on. We'll look at the buildings people say are empty, the airport traffic that's changed, and the deeper forces shaping Singapore today. By the end, you might see this story in a completely different way. Walk through certain parts of Singapore during off-peak hours, and you might notice something unusual. Offices with lights off. Retail spaces that feel quieter than expected. Entire floors that seem underused. It's easy to interpret this as decline. After all, empty space in a city known for density stands out immediately. But there's context behind this shift. Remote work has reshaped how offices function across the world, and Singapore is no exception. Companies that once needed full floors now operate with hybrid teams. Employees rotate in and out, meaning buildings appear less occupied even when they're still in use. Then there's the retail shift. E-commerce has changed how people shop. Physical stores no longer carry the same constant foot traffic they once did. Some have downsized, others have moved, and a few have closed entirely. Add to that rising rents in prime areas, and you get a natural reshuffling of businesses. So what looks like abandonment may actually be transition. Buildings aren't necessarily dying. They're waiting for new purposes, new tenants, and new ways to fit into a changing economy. Singapore is filled with iconic locations. Places that once drew massive crowds daily. Shopping districts, business hubs, and entertainment centers that define the city's global image. But even these spaces are not immune to change. Consumer behavior has shifted. People no longer gather in the same way they used to. Social life has spread out, moving into neighborhoods, smaller venues, and digital spaces. Tourism patterns have also evolved. While Singapore still attracts millions, visitor behavior is different now. Shorter stays, targeted experiences, and less time spent wandering large commercial zones. Some famous buildings now feel quieter, especially outside peak periods. This can create the impression that they are fading. But relevance isn't always about constant crowd density. Many of these places are being redesigned, repurposed, or repositioned to match new expectations. A quieter space doesn't necessarily mean a failing one. It might simply mean the role of that space is changing. Singapore's airport has long been one of the busiest and most admired in the world. Known for efficiency, design, and passenger experience, it set a global standard. So when people say parts of it feel like a ghost hub, it raises eyebrows. The reality is more nuanced. Global travel patterns have shifted significantly in recent years. Flight routes have changed. Passenger volumes have fluctuated. And recovery has not been uniform across all regions. At certain times of day, or in specific terminals, the airport can feel quieter than expected. Fewer passengers. Less congestion. More open space. But this doesn't mean the airport is failing. In fact, operations have become more streamlined. Passenger flow is smoother. Wait times are often shorter. What used to feel crowded now feels controlled. The perception of emptiness may simply come from a comparison to past extremes. Instead of chaos, there is now balance. And that can feel unfamiliar in a place once defined by constant motion. To understand what's happening in Singapore, you have to zoom out. This is not a city in decline. It's a city adjusting to global shifts. Trade patterns are evolving. Technology is reshaping industries. Work culture is changing. And Singapore, as a highly connected global hub, feels these changes quickly. Population growth has slowed. Workforce dynamics are shifting. And businesses are becoming more selective about how they use space. At the same time, Singapore continues to invest heavily in infrastructure, innovation, and long-term planning. New developments are underway. Old ones are being reimagined. This creates a temporary imbalance. Some areas feel quieter while others are still emerging. It's less about emptiness and more about redistribution. What you're seeing is not a collapse, but a recalibration. A city fine-tuning itself for the next phase of growth. So, is Singapore emptying out? Not quite. What's really happening is subtler, and far more interesting. The city is transitioning from one era to another. From constant physical density to more flexible, adaptive use of space. From traditional retail and office models to new, hybrid systems. This kind of change can look like decline if you're expecting everything to stay the same. But cities that survive are the ones that evolve. Singapore has built its reputation on anticipating the future. And what we're seeing now is part of that process. Some spaces are quieter. Some systems are shifting. But the underlying structure remains strong. In many ways, this is what resilience looks like. Not endless growth at all times, but the ability to pause, adjust, and move forward in a smarter way. So the next time you hear that Singapore is emptying out, take a closer look. You might not be witnessing an ending, you might be watching a transformation. There's one more piece to this story that often gets overlooked. Perception spreads faster than reality. A few quiet buildings, a less crowded terminal, or a viral clip can quickly shape a global narrative. Suddenly, Singapore is emptying out becomes a headline people repeat without questioning what's actually changing. But cities like Singapore don't fade quietly. They adapt with intent. Urban planners are already rethinking how spaces are used. Offices are becoming mixed-use environments. Retail areas are turning into lifestyle destinations. Even transport hubs are evolving into experiences, not just transit points. And with new technologies, shifting demographics, and changing expectations, the definition of a busy city is being rewritten. It may no longer be about packed crowds everywhere, all the time. Instead, it's about efficiency, flexibility, and quality of life. So what looks empty today might actually be space being made for what comes next. And that next phase could redefine Singapore all over again.